I never thought I'd be uninvited to Christmas dinner in my own childhood home, but there I was, recently divorced, seemingly disappointing to everyone, and suddenly unwelcome at the family table. When my mother said those words, "It might be better if you didn't come this year," something inside me broke and mended all at once. Little did my family know that my billionaire boss, the man they'd heard me mention but never met, was about to change everything. Not just for Christmas dinner, but for how I saw myself, my worth, and my place in this world. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because it was garbage day, and there was something poetically fitting about signing the final documents that officially ended my 8-year marriage while hearing the rumble of the garbage truck outside my apartment window. I'm Sarah. Mitchell, 34 years old, recently demoted from wife to ex-wife, and trying to rebuild a life I never planned on living alone. The manila envelope felt heavier than it should have as I signed my name for the last time as Sarah Donovan and reverted to my maiden name. James hadn't contested anything. He was too busy with his new life, his new love, his administrative assistant who had somehow become essential to him in ways I apparently never was. The classic story, long hours at the office that weren't actually spent working, mysterious text messages, weekend conferences that couldn't be verified. When confronted, he didn't even have the decency to deny it for long. "We just grew apart, Sarah," he had said, as if our marriage had simply wandered off like a distracted child. These things happen. These things happen. As if 8 years could be dismissed with a platitude. I placed the signed papers back in the envelope and sealed it. My lawyer would receive them tomorrow, and the final administrative steps would proceed without me needing to do anything further. Modern divorce, so efficient, so clean on paper. The emotional debris, however, was another matter entirely. My apartment was small but functional, a one-bedroom I'd found quickly when it became clear I needed to move out of our shared home. James had offered to leave, but the house was too big, too expensive for me to maintain on my salary alone. Besides, every corner held memories I wasn't ready to confront daily. Better to start fresh somewhere anonymous, somewhere without history. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to my tiny balcony that overlooked a quiet street lined with maple trees just beginning to change color. October in New England, nature's most dramatic transformation. How appropriate that my life was changing colors too, though I wasn't yet sure what palette awaited me. My phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. I considered ignoring it, but then remembered I was expecting a work call. Remington Archer, my boss and CEO of Archer Innovations, had mentioned needing to discuss the Henderson project before tomorrow's client meeting. The screen showed my mother's name instead. "Hi, Mom," I answered, trying to infuse my voice with a cheerfulness I didn't feel. "Sarah, I was just checking to see if you've mailed those papers yet." No greeting, no how are you, my mother, Patricia. Mitchell had never been one to waste time on pleasantries when there was business to discuss. "Just sign them," I replied, taking a sip of tea. "They'll go out in tomorrow's mail." "Good. The sooner this whole unfortunate business is behind you, the better." Unfortunate business. That's what my family had taken to calling my divorce, as if it were a regrettable investment or an embarrassing fender bender rather than the implosion of my life. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her tone suggesting she was checking a box rather than genuinely inquiring. "I'm fine," I said automatically. It was easier than explaining that I vacillated between numbness and searing pain, between relief that the charade was over and terror of what came next. "Well, that's good." She paused, and I could hear her shuffling papers in the background. My mother, ever the multitasker. "Your father and I were talking, and we think it might be best if you skipped the family Christmas gathering this year." I nearly dropped my mug. "What?" "Just this year, dear. With everything so fresh, and James's parents will be there. You know we've been friends for years. It would be awkward for everyone involved. Plus, Ashley just announced her engagement to Richard, and we don't want anything to overshadow their moment. Ashley, my younger sister. Perfect Ashley with her perfect career as a pediatric surgeon, her perfect fiancé who came from perfect money, her perfect timing in getting engaged right when my life fell apart. You're uninviting me to Christmas, I clarified, still not quite believing what I was hearing. Not uninviting, Sarah. Don't be dramatic. We're just suggesting a break this year. Give everyone some time to adjust to the new situation. My new situation. Divorced, failed, diminished. I see, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained while something inside me crumbled. It's really for the best, dear. You'll see. Use the time to reflect and heal. Maybe take a little trip somewhere. Isn't that what people do after divorces? Eat, pray, love, and all that? My mother had never read the book or seen the movie, but she had a knack for absorbing cultural references and deploying them with almost correct context. Sure, Mom. Whatever you think is best. Good girl. We'll FaceTime on Christmas Day, of course. It'll be almost like you're there. But it wouldn't be anything like being there, and we both knew it. Christmas at the Mitchell house was an elaborate affair, a tradition stretching back to my childhood. The massive tree that took Dad hours to perfect, Mom's collection of ornaments, each with their own story, the formal Christmas Eve dinner followed by midnight church service, the Christmas morning gift exchange in pajamas, the afternoon feast with extended family and close friends. It was the one time of year when the Mitchell family performance of perfect happiness seemed almost genuine, and now I was being cut from the cast. I should go, Mom. I have a work call coming up. Of course, busy bee. That's the spirit. Throw yourself into your career. Silver linings, right? Call me later in the week. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. I didn't have time to process what had just happened because my phone immediately rang again, this time with Remington Archer's name on the screen. Sarah Mitchell, I answered, slipping into professional mode with practiced ease. Sarah, it's Rem. Sorry for the late notice, but can you come to the office tonight? Something's come up with Henderson that can't wait until morning. I glanced at my watch, nearly 7 p.m. Of course. I can be there in 30 minutes. Perfect. I'll have dinner brought in. See you soon. The call ended, and I was grateful for the interruption, for a reason to shower, dress, and leave the apartment that suddenly felt too small, too empty. As executive assistant to Remington Archer, I was accustomed to unexpected schedule changes and after-hours requests. Archer Innovations was a boutique technology firm that specialized in custom software solutions for Fortune 500 companies. We weren't large, but we were elite, with clients who paid premium prices for our expertise and discretion. I'd been with the company for 6 years, one of Rem's first hires when he expanded beyond a one-man operation into a legitimate business. He was an unusual boss, brilliant but remarkably grounded for someone who had built a multi-million-dollar company before age 40. He respected my input, trusted my judgment, and paid me well enough that I'd been able to maintain financial independence even through the divorce. In a professional landscape often marked by toxic executives and thankless work, I knew how fortunate I was to work for someone like Rem. The office was housed in a renovated textile mill, exposed brick walls, massive windows, polished concrete floors. When I arrived, only the security lights illuminated the open workspace. Rem's office door was ajar, a slice of light spilling into the darkness. I knocked lightly before entering. "You summoned me?" I said with a small smile. Rem looked up from his computer, returning my smile with one that reached his eyes. At 42, he maintained the energy and curiosity of someone much younger, though the subtle silver threading through his dark hair hinted at the pressure of building and maintaining a successful business. "Sarah, thank you for coming in. Sorry about the short notice. He gestured to the conference table in the corner of his expansive office where several containers of food waited. I got Thai from that place you like. I figured if I'm ruining your evening, I should at least feed you properly. You're assuming I had evening plans to ruin, I replied, setting my bag down and joining him at the table. Touché, he said, passing me a container of pad Thai. He remembered my usual order. Though I maintain that sitting at home in pajamas watching bad reality television counts as plans worth protecting. I laughed despite myself. You know me too well. We ate while reviewing the Henderson presentation. Their CEO had unexpectedly requested additional information about implementation timelines, and we needed to adjust our proposal before tomorrow's meeting. It was detailed work that required focus, and I was grateful for the distraction from my earlier call with my mother. After an hour of revisions, we took a break. Rem leaned back in his chair, studying me with the careful attention he typically reserved for complex code problems. Everything okay, Sarah? You seem a bit off tonight. I considered deflecting but decided against it. Rem wasn't just my boss. Over the years, he'd become a friend, albeit one with clear professional boundaries. I signed the divorce papers. Today, I said, reorganizing the empty food containers to avoid eye contact. And then my mother called to disinvite me from family Christmas because it might make James's parents uncomfortable and overshadow my sister's engagement. I hadn't intended to share quite so much, but once I started, the words tumbled out. Unbidden. Rem was quiet for a moment. Your family is disinviting you from Christmas because you got divorced? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. According to my mother, they're suggesting a break this year to let everyone adjust to the situation. I mimicked her precise, clipped pronunciation. That's absurd, he said flatly. When someone's going through a difficult time, you pull them closer, not push them away. Not in the Mitchell family. We prefer to hide inconvenient emotions and uncomfortable situations. I attempted a light tone, but couldn't quite manage it. What are you going to do instead? I shrugged. I haven't thought that far ahead. Book a spa weekend? Watch the complete Lord of the Rings extended editions? Develop a sudden interest in tropical destinations? The divorced woman's healing journey is apparently very predictable. Rem didn't smile at my attempt at humor. Instead, he regarded me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Come with me to Vermont, he said suddenly. What? For Christmas, my family has a lodge in Stowe. Nothing fancy, but it's peaceful. My parents will be there, my brother and his wife, their kids. You'd be welcome. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Rem, that's incredibly kind, but I couldn't impose on your family holiday. It's not an imposition. My mother always claims we need more people to justify the amount of food she prepares. He leaned forward. Look, no pressure, but spending the holidays alone after everything you've been through seems unnecessarily punitive. His offer was tempting, far more appealing than any of the alternatives I'd half-jokingly suggested. Still, the boundary between professional and personal loomed large. Can I think about it? I asked finally. Of course. He returned to the presentation as if he hadn't just extended an invitation that would fundamentally shift our relationship. Let's finish this up so we can both get some rest before tomorrow. We worked for another hour, refining the presentation until we were both satisfied with the changes. As I gathered my things to leave, Rem spoke again. Sarah, one more thing. I've been meaning to discuss this with you for a while, and now seems as good a time as any. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer and handed it to me. I'd like to promote you to Client Relations Director. It would mean a significant pay increase, more responsibility, and some travel. But I think you're ready. I opened the folder to find a formal offer letter with a salary figure that made my eyes widen. Rem, I don't know what to say. You've earned it. You've been doing much of this work already, just without the title or compensation. The team respects you, clients trust you, and frankly, I need someone in this role who I can rely on completely. He paused. This isn't charity or timing related to your personal situation. I've had this planned for months but wanted to wait until after the Henderson deal was secured. I believed him. Rem wasn't the type to make business decisions based on personal circumstances. Still, the timing felt somehow cosmically significant. A professional affirmation on the same day my personal life had been deemed too messy to include. In family celebrations. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with unexpected emotion. I won't disappoint you. I know you won't. He stood, signaling the end of our meeting. Think about Vermont. No pressure, but the offer stands. Either way, we can discuss the promotion details after the Henderson meeting tomorrow. On the drive back to my apartment, I found myself considering Rem's invitation more seriously than I had initially allowed. The thought of spending Christmas alone in my small apartment held little appeal, but neither did intruding on someone else's family gathering, even with an explicit invitation. Yet, there was something tempting about the idea of a Christmas, completely removed from Mitchell family traditions and expectations. No perfectly coordinated decorations, no carefully curated gift exchanges, no underlying current of competition between Ashley and me. Just snow, mountains, and people who had no preconceived notions about who I was supposed to be. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I made a decision. I would accept both of Rem's offers, the promotion and the Christmas invitation. It was time to step into something new, to build a life that wasn't defined by my failed marriage or my family's conditional acceptance. I texted Rem before I could second-guess myself. Thank you for the promotion opportunity. I'm honored and excited to accept. And if the Vermont invitation still stands, I'd love to join your family for Christmas. His response came quickly. Excellent decision on both counts. Details tomorrow. Get some rest. I entered my apartment feeling lighter than I had in months. The signed divorce papers still sat on the counter, but they no longer seemed to carry the same weight. My mother's rejection still stung, but it was tempered by Rem's inclusion. For the first time since James had told me he was leaving, I felt a flicker of something that resembled hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the life ahead of me could be better than the one I was leaving behind. As I got ready for bed, I realized something significant had shifted within me. The divorce papers, my mother's call, Rem's dual offers, all in one day. It was as if the universe had decided to collapse an entire transformation into 24 hours, forcing me to choose between clinging to the past or stepping boldly into an uncertain but potentially magnificent future. I chose the future. The Henderson presentation went flawlessly the next morning. I'd been with Archer Innovations long enough to anticipate client concerns before they arose, and the revised proposal addressed everything their CEO had requested. When the meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of a signed contract by week's end, I caught Rem's approving nod from across the conference room. "Excellent work, everyone," he said to our team as the Henderson executives departed. "Sarah, could I see you in my office in 15 minutes? As the room emptied, my colleague Daphne nudged me with her elbow. "Private meeting with the boss? Sounds serious." "Just following up on some details," I replied casually, though we both knew it was about my promotion. I hadn't shared the news yet. It still felt too new, too precious to discuss openly. "If you say so." Daphne gathered her notes with a knowing smile. "A few of us are getting drinks after work to celebrate the Henderson deal. You should join us." I hesitated. Since the divorce proceedings began, I declined most after-work socializing. It had been easier to retreat, to avoid questions and sympathetic looks. but maybe it was time to step back into the world. Sure, I said, surprising both Daphne and myself. Text me the details. In Rem's office 15 minutes later, we finalized the details of my promotion. The new role would begin officially after the new year, giving me time to transition my current responsibilities and prepare for expanded duties. I'd like to announce this at the holiday party next week, Rem said, leaning back in his chair. The team should hear it from me directly. Our annual holiday gathering was scheduled for the following Friday. An elegant dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown, followed by drinks and dancing for those inclined to stay. Unlike many corporate functions that felt obligatory, Archer's holiday celebration was genuinely enjoyable, partly because Rem insisted on quality over quantity and respected everyone's time by keeping the formal portion brief. That works for me, I agreed, and I've been thinking about Vermont. The prospect of Christmas with Rem's family still felt surreal, but I was growing more comfortable with the idea. I should probably know more about what to expect if I'm going to be crashing your family holiday. Rem smiled. You're not crashing anything, but fair enough. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. The lodge has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it in the 1950s, my father expanded it in the 80s, and I renovated it about 5 years ago. It's on 20 acres outside Stowe, private, quiet, with great views of Mount Mansfield. It sounds beautiful. It is. We typically arrive on the 23rd and stay through New Year's. Days are unstructured, skiing if you want, hiking, reading by the fire, cooking together. Evenings involve board games that get ridiculously competitive, too much wine, and conversations that range from politics to physics to childhood embarrassments. The casual intimacy he described was far removed from the carefully orchestrated performances of Mitchell family gatherings. It sounded both wonderful and slightly terrifying. You'll have your own room and bathroom, Rem continued, seemingly reading my thoughts. And there's no pressure to participate in anything that doesn't appeal. My family is good about respecting boundaries. Another contrast to my own family experience. It sounds lovely, I said sincerely. Are you sure your parents won't mind an unexpected guest? I called my mother last night. She's already planning your favorite breakfast and asking about dietary restrictions. He smiled at my surprised expression. Mom takes hosting very seriously. I don't deserve this kindness, I said quietly, the words escaping before I could censor them. Something flashed in Rem's eyes, a brief but intense emotion I couldn't quite identify. Yes, you do. His tone left no room for argument. You're intelligent, loyal, and incredibly resilient. You deserve far more kindness than you've received lately. I didn't know how to respond to such direct affirmation, so I redirected. Well, please thank your mother for me. And let me know what I can contribute. Wine, gifts for the family, whatever would be appropriate. Just bring yourself in comfortable clothes. Everything else is handled. He glanced at his watch. I have a call in 5 minutes. We can discuss logistics closer to the date. As I turned to leave, he added, Sarah, I'm glad you're coming. The holidays can be difficult even without family complications. No one should have to navigate them alone. His words stayed with me as I returned to my desk, their simple kindness a stark contrast to my mother's casual rejection. I opened my email to find a message from my mother with the subject line, Christmas planning. For a moment, I thought, perhaps she'd reconsidered her position, but the content quickly dispelled that notion. Sarah, I've been thinking more about our conversation. I hope you weren't upset by the suggestion to skip Christmas this year. It really is for the best. Gives you time to process everything without the pressure of putting on a brave face. Ashley and Richard will be announcing their engagement officially, and we're planning a small feature in the local paper. I'm sure you understand why having you there might create awkward questions. Dad and I will set aside your annual ornament, of course. Let me know if you decide on a nice trip somewhere. Love, Mom. Each year since childhood, we'd each received a special ornament that reflected something significant from the past 12 months. The tradition was meaningful to me despite our complicated dynamics. Mom's casual mention of setting it aside, rather than still giving it to me, underscored my sudden outsider status. I stared at the screen, anger and hurt swirling into a potent mixture. Without overthinking, I replied, Mom, thank you for clarifying your position. I've made alternate plans for Christmas and will be spending it with friends in Vermont. No need to set aside an ornament. Perhaps you could give it to James's parents as a token of your ongoing friendship. I'm sure they would appreciate the gesture more than I would under the circumstances. Sarah. I hit send before I could reconsider, then immediately regretted the petty tone. It wasn't like me to be sarcastic, especially with my mother. But then again, it wasn't like my mother to exclude her daughter from a family holiday, because divorce was inconvenient to her social narratives. My phone buzzed almost immediately with an incoming call. My mother. I sent it to voicemail. Whatever she had to say could wait until I wasn't sitting in an open office with colleagues within earshot. She left a message, her voice tight with controlled anger. Sarah, that response was completely inappropriate. Call me so we can discuss this like adults. I silenced my phone and returned to work, channeling my frustration into productivity. By late afternoon, I had cleared my inbox, prepared materials for 2 upcoming client meetings, and reorganized our shared digital files, tasks that had been on my to-do list for weeks. Impressive output today, Daphne commented as she stopped by my desk around 5. You coming to Harlow's? First round's on me. I hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'll meet you there in 30 minutes. After Daphne left, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from my mother, 1 from my father, and a text from Ashley. Mom's upset. What did you say to her? Do you always have to make everything about you? The irony of Ashley accusing me of making everything about myself when I'd been excluded from Christmas to avoid overshadowing her engagement wasn't lost on me. I turned off my phone entirely and headed to the restroom to freshen up before joining my colleagues. Harlow's was a gastropub a few blocks from our office, upscale enough for business casual but relaxed enough for after-work unwinding. When I arrived, Daphne had secured a corner booth where 5 other Archer employees were already ordering appetizers and drinks. Sarah, Marco, our lead developer, raised his glass in greeting. The woman of the hour, that Henderson presentation, was masterful. I slid into the booth, touched by the warm welcome. Team effort, I demurred, though his recognition felt good after the day's emotional whiplash. Maybe, but your handling of Thompson's questions about implementation timeline was what sealed it, Daphne countered, sliding a glass of wine toward me. Cabernet, right? Perfect. Thanks. I took a sip, letting the rich warmth of good wine and genuine camaraderie begin to dissolve the knot of tension between my shoulders. For the next hour, conversation flowed easily among topics ranging from client projects to holiday plans to office gossip. No one mentioned my divorce, asked about my family, or treated me with the wary sympathy I'd grown accustomed to in recent months. They simply included me as a valued colleague and friend. So, Sarah, Elliot, our head of marketing, said during a lull, rumor has it Rem's making a big announcement at the holiday party. Any inside information you can share? I kept my expression neutral, despite the flutter of pride I felt. You know I can't discuss that. Worth a try, he laughed. But whatever it is, it seems positive. He's been in an unusually good mood lately. Maybe he's finally dating someone, suggested Yasmin from accounting. That man needs a life outside the office. Says the woman who routinely emails reports at midnight, teased Marco. That's different. I have insomnia. Rem just works too much. Yasmin turned to me. He listens to you, Sarah. Tell him to get a personal life before he turns into one of those tech CEOs who can only talk about optimization metrics and disruption paradigms. I laughed, grateful for the easy rapport. I'll add it to our next meeting agenda, right after quarterly projections and before software updates. As drinks turned into dinner, I found myself genuinely enjoying the evening. The first social outing since my separation that hadn't felt like an exercise in pretending to be okay. Around 8, I excused myself, wanting to end the night on a high note rather than risk energy depletion. I'm heading out, but this was great. Thanks for including me. About time you rejoined the land of the living, Daphne said with an affectionate nudge. See you tomorrow. I walked the few blocks to the parking garage where I'd left my car, the crisp December air invigorating after the warm pub atmosphere. As I approached my parking level, I noticed a familiar figure leaning against a sleek black Tesla, Rem. Working late again? I asked, approaching with curiosity. He straightened, looking momentarily surprised to see me. Conference call with our Tokyo partners. 8 p.m. here is their morning. He nodded toward Harlow's direction. You were with the team? Yes, celebrating the Henderson deal. It was nice. Overdue, probably. He smiled. Good. You've been too isolated lately. The observation was accurate but felt intimate coming from my boss, highlighting again how our professional relationship had developed nuanced dimensions over the years. Pot kettle, I replied lightly. According to Yasmin, you need a personal life before you turn into a soulless tech automaton who can only speak in industry jargon. Rem laughed, the sound echoing in the concrete structure. Yasmin has strong opinions for someone I see in the office on Sundays. That's what I said. Well, not exactly, but the sentiment was conveyed. We stood in companionable silence for a moment before Rem spoke again. I'm glad you're coming to Vermont. It's been a difficult year for you, and my family's pretty good at creating space for both reflection and distraction, depending on what's needed. The simple acknowledgement of my difficult year, stated without pity or awkwardness, felt like permission to be exactly where I was in my healing process. Thank you, I said, finding the words inadequate for the gratitude I felt. For everything. The promotion, the invitation, the understanding. You've earned the promotion through years of exceptional work, he said firmly. The rest is just basic human decency. Your family's response says far more about them than about you. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated in my purse. I'd turned it back on before leaving the restaurant. Pulling it out, I saw my father's name on, the screen. Rem noticed my expression. Everything okay? Family drama, I explained with a sigh. I should probably take this. Have a good night, Rem. You too, Sarah. See you tomorrow. I answered the call as Rem walked toward his car. Hi, Dad. Sarah, what's this about you not coming for Christmas? My father's voice held the forced patience he typically employed when mediating family conflicts. Your mother is very upset. I'm sure she is, I replied, unlocking my own car and sliding into the driver's seat. But she made it clear I wasn't welcome this year because my divorce might create awkwardness with James's parents and detract from Ashley's engagement announcement. That's not exactly what she meant, he hedged, though we both knew it was precisely what she'd meant. It was more about giving you space to heal without social pressure. Dad, she specifically said it would be awkward for everyone involved, and suggested I take an eat, pray, love vacation instead of attending our family Christmas. He sighed heavily. Your mother sometimes expresses things poorly, but her heart's in the right place. She's worried about you. Is she? Because it sounds like she's more worried about appearances and Ashley's spotlight moment. Sarah, please, it's Christmas. Family should be together. I agree. That's why her decision to exclude me was so hurtful. I started my car, suddenly exhausted. Look, I've made other plans now. I'm spending Christmas with friends in Vermont. What friends in Vermont? You've never mentioned friends in Vermont. My boss and his family. They have a lodge in Stowe. A pause. You're spending Christmas with your boss? Sarah, that's, unusual. So is being disinvited from family. Christmas after your husband leaves you for his assistant, but here we are. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Sarcasm doesn't become you, my father said stiffly. I'm trying to understand the situation. The situation is simple, Dad. Mom didn't want me at Christmas. I found an alternative. Problem solved. And now you're being deliberately obtuse. His patience was clearly wearing thin. Spending a holiday with your employer crosses professional boundaries. Surely you can see that. Rem is a friend as well as my boss. His family is kind and welcoming. I appreciate their invitation and I've accepted it. This feels like retaliation. Against your mother. It's not, I said firmly, though there was perhaps a grain of truth in his assessment. It's me making the best of a difficult situation and accepting kindness where it's offered. Another heavy sigh. I wish you'd reconsider. Your mother's already talking about changing our plans now that you won't be here. The manipulation was so transparent it would have been comical if it weren't so painful. Do whatever you think is best, Dad. I need to go. I'm driving. We'll discuss this further, he said, clearly unhappy with the conversation's direction. Goodbye, Dad. Love you. I ended the call before he could respond, a mixture of anger and sadness washing over me. The contrast between my family's conditional acceptance and the straightforward kindness of Rem and my colleagues was striking. It wasn't just about Christmas. It was about being valued as I was, not for how well I fit into others' narratives. As I drove home, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. For years, I'd measured my worth through external validation, my parents' approval, my husband's love, my sister's respect. The collapse of my marriage had initially felt like confirmation of my inadequacy. But now, surrounded by people who appreciated me professionally and accepted me personally, I was beginning to recognize that others' treatment reflected their limitations more than my value. My apartment felt different when I arrived home, not empty, but peaceful. I made a cup of tea and curled up on my small balcony with a journal I'd purchased weeks ago but hadn't used. On the first blank page, I wrote, "Things I know to be true." Below it, I added my first entry. "My worth is not determined by those who cannot see it." It was a small beginning, but it felt like solid ground upon which to build a new understanding of myself, one based not on others' perceptions but on my own inherent value. As I continued writing, adding truths I was beginning to recognize, I felt something unexpected, gratitude for the painful clarity my family's rejection had provided. Without it, I might have continued seeking validation from those constitutionally unable to provide it. The holiday party was scheduled for the following Friday evening at Riverview, an upscale restaurant known for its panoramic views of the city skyline and river beyond. I'd spent more time than usual considering my outfit, partially because of the anticipated promotion announcement, but also because this event marked a personal milestone, my first formal function as a single woman in nearly a decade. I finally settled on a deep emerald silk dress I'd purchased on impulse months ago but never worn. With its elegant simplicity and rich color, it felt both festive and confident, exactly the impression I wanted to convey. I paired it with the pearl earrings James had given me for our 5th anniversary, a conscious choice to reclaim something beautiful from our shared past rather than discarding everything associated with our marriage. When I arrived at Riverview, the party was already underway. Colleagues mingled near the bar, the hum of conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. Daphne spotted me immediately, waving me over to a small group. "You look amazing," she whispered, as I joined them. "That color is perfect on you." "Thanks," I said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. You clean up pretty well yourself. She grinned, smoothing the skirt of her burgundy cocktail dress. Different from our usual office attire, right? Oh, heads up. Rem just walked in. I turned to see Rem entering the private dining room we'd reserved, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his tall frame. He moved through the room with ease, greeting staff members by name, his genuine interest in their responses evident even from a distance. When he reached our group, his gaze lingered briefly on me. "Sarah, you look lovely." "Thank you," I replied, unexpectedly warmed by the simple compliment. "So does everyone. It's nice seeing the team outside office context." "Agreed. It reminds me why I started this company, to work with exceptional people who deserve to be celebrated." He addressed the broader group. "Dinner will be served in about 20 minutes. I'll make my annual remarks beforehand, so enjoy your drinks and conversation until then." As Rem moved on to the next cluster of employees, Daphne nudged me. "Was that my imagination, or did our esteemed CEO just give you a more than professional once-over?" "Your imagination," I said firmly, though I'd noticed the brief intensity of his gaze as well. "Rem doesn't mix business with pleasure. You know that." "Maybe," she said skeptically. "But he's also human, contrary to some office rumors." I changed the subject, uncomfortable with the direction of conversation. "Have you finalized your holiday plans? You were mentioning a cruise?" The diversion worked, and Daphne launched into details about her upcoming Caribbean vacation. As she spoke, I found my attention periodically drifting to Rem as he made his way around the room, struck by how he balanced authority with genuine connection, a leadership quality I'd always admired. At precisely 7:30, servers directed us to assigned tables for dinner. I found myself seated at Rem's table along with our department heads, a placement that made sense given my current role, but still felt significant. The first 2 courses passed pleasantly with conversation flowing among topics both professional and personal. After the main course was cleared and before dessert was served, Rem stood, tapping his glass gently for attention. The room quieted, as all eyes turned toward him. "Before we get to dessert, which I'm told involves chocolate lava cake, so we'll keep this brief, I want to express my gratitude to each of you." He scanned the room, making eye contact with various team members. "Archer Innovations exists because of your talent, dedication, and integrity. The work we do matters because you make it matter." He paused, allowing his words to resonate. "This year has been our most successful to date. We've expanded our client base by 30%, increased revenue by 42%, and most importantly, maintained our commitment to creating technology that enhances rather than replaces human connection." Another pause. "These achievements deserve recognition, which is why I'm pleased to announce that everyone will receive a year-end bonus representing 15% of your annual salary." Appreciative murmurs rippled through the room. "Additionally," Remya continued, "growth requires evolution in our organizational structure. I'm delighted to announce the creation of a new position, Client Relations Director. This role will oversee all aspects of client experience from initial contact through ongoing partnership." He turned toward me, extending his hand in invitation. "Sarah Mitchell has demonstrated exceptional skill in anticipating client needs, translating technical concepts for non-technical audiences, and building relationships based on genuine understanding rather than transactional convenience. I'm pleased to announce her promotion to this position, effective January 1st. As I stood to join Rem, the room erupted in applause. The genuine warmth of my colleague's response brought unexpected emotion to my throat. These people saw me, not as an extension of a failed marriage or a family disappointment, but as a professional whose contributions mattered. "Thank you," I said simply when the applause subsided. "I'm honored by your confidence and excited about this new challenge." Archer Innovations isn't just where I work. It's a community of exceptional people creating meaningful impact. I'm grateful to be part of it. As I returned to my seat, colleagues from other tables approached to offer congratulations. The remainder of the evening passed in a pleasant blur of dessert, coffee, and conversation. By 11, the formal dinner had concluded. Though many employees moved to the restaurant's lounge area for continued celebration, I was considering whether to join them when Rem appeared at my side. "Congratulations again," he said quietly. "Your words about community were perfect. That's exactly what I've tried to build here." "It's what you've succeeded in building," I corrected, "and it matters. Especially to those of us who've discovered that other communities can be considerably less supportive." Understanding flashed in his eyes. "Any further fallout from your family after our parking garage conversation?" "Just the usual manipulation. Tactics. My father tried to make me feel guilty for retaliating against my mother by accepting your invitation. As if finding an alternative to spending Christmas alone was somehow petty." Rem shook his head. "Their loss. Genuinely." "I'm beginning to see it that way too," I admitted. "It's taken me longer than it should have." Self-worth is easily distorted by those who've known us longest. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see ourselves clearly. He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I've always seen remarkable strength in you, Sarah." Long before recent events brought it into sharper focus, the sincerity in his expression caught me off guard. There was something in his gaze beyond professional appreciation or friendly support, something I wasn't quite ready to name. "Thank you," I said, suddenly aware of how close we were standing in the crowded room. "For seeing that, and for everything else." A brief silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Rem glanced at his watch. "I should circulate a bit more before people start leaving. Will you be joining the after-party in the lounge?" I hesitated only briefly. "Yes, I think I will. It's been a good evening. I'm not quite ready for it to end." He smiled. "I'm glad. Celebration suits you, Sarah. You should indulge in it more often." As he moved away to speak with other employees, I realized he was right. Celebration did suit me, not the carefully orchestrated performances my family specialized in, but genuine appreciation for meaningful accomplishments and authentic connections. For too long, I'd allowed others' narratives to define my experience. My worth as a daughter measured against my sister's achievements, my value as a wife diminished by my husband's betrayal. But standing in that room, surrounded by people who recognized my professional contributions and welcomed my personal presence, I felt something shifting fundamentally within me. The painful exclusion from my family's Christmas had unexpectedly created space for something better to emerge. Not just alternative holiday plans, but a new understanding of where true belonging comes from. Not from those who welcome you only, when you conform to their expectations, but from those who appreciate you precisely as you are. As I made my way toward the lounge to join my colleagues, I felt lighter than I had in months. The journey ahead, both professionally with my new position and personally with my continuing healing, wouldn't be without challenges. But for the first time since signing those divorce papers, I felt genuine optimism about the future. What I didn't yet realize was how dramatically that future would shift in the coming weeks, or how my mother's attempt to exclude me from the family Christmas would ultimately lead to one of the most transformative experiences of my life. The week following the holiday party passed in a whirlwind of activity. The Henderson contract was finalized, bringing with it an avalanche of implementation details requiring attention before the office closed for the holidays. I welcomed the busy schedule, finding comfort in the familiar cadence of professional challenges that, unlike personal ones, had clear solutions and defined parameters. My family situation remained unsettled. After my father's call, my mother had sent several text messages ranging from guilt-inducing I'm just trying to protect you, to passively aggressive. I've told everyone you're taking a healing retreat. I responded minimally, maintaining my boundary without escalating the conflict. Ashley called once, leaving a voicemail that expressed confusion rather than empathy. Mom says you're mad about Christmas? I don't get it. This isn't like you, Sarah. But it was like me, the authentic me who had been submerged beneath years of accommodation and peacekeeping. The me who was finally emerging through the cracks of my shattered marriage and family expectations. Wednesday afternoon, I received an unexpected email from James. Seeing his name in my inbox triggered a momentary tightness in my chest, but not the debilitating ache that such contact would have caused even a month earlier. Progress, I supposed. The message was brief and businesslike. Sarah, my parents mentioned some confusion about holiday arrangements with your family. I wanted to clarify that I didn't ask your parents to exclude you from Christmas. That decision was entirely theirs. I don't know if that information matters to you, but I felt I should state it directly. I hope you're doing well. James. I stared at the screen, processing this confirmation of what I'd already suspected. My parents' exclusion hadn't been requested by James or his family. It had been my mother's preemptive decision, made not to protect me but to avoid social complexity that might detract from Ashley's moment. After careful consideration, I replied, with equal brevity. James, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate your directness. I hope you and your family have a good holiday. Sarah. I felt no need to explain my alternative plans or express any emotion beyond basic courtesy. Another sign of healing, the diminishing need to justify my choices or seek validation from someone who had relinquished the right to either judge or approve them. That evening, Rem called to discuss logistical details for Vermont. We'd leave on December 23rd, the day after the office closed for the holiday break. He offered to drive, mentioning that his car was better equipped for potential mountain weather. We'd return on December 28th, giving me a few days of solitude before the New Year began. My mother wants to know if you have any food allergies or strong preferences, he said toward the end of our conversation. No allergies and I'm not picky, I assured him. But please tell her not to go to any special trouble. Rem laughed. Telling Diane Archer not to go to special trouble for guests is like telling the tide not to come in. Except that you'll be thoroughly fed and cared for and bring your appetite. His casual reference to his mother, using her name, implying her characteristic generosity, made the reality of spending Christmas with his family more concrete. A flutter of anxiety mingled with anticipation in my stomach. There's something else, I said, deciding transparency was important given the unusual circumstances. I want to be clear that I'm accepting this invitation because I genuinely want to spend the holiday with you and your family, not just to avoid being alone or to spite my parents. I'd hate for you to think I'm using your kindness as a form of retaliation. I never thought that, Rem replied without hesitation. And my invitation wasn't extended out of pity. I enjoy your company, Sarah. My family will too. His simple affirmation eased my concern. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. The weekend before our departure, I finally addressed a task I'd been avoiding, shopping for appropriate gifts for Rem's family. The prospect was daunting. What do you buy for people you've never met who are hosting you for a major holiday? After consideration, I settled on a carefully curated basket of local specialties for his parents. Artisanal preserves, small batch maple products, and handmade chocolates from a renowned local confectioner. For Rem's brother and sister-in-law, I selected a collection of award-winning regional wines. For their children, Rem had mentioned a nephew and niece, ages 8 and 10. I chose books based on interests he'd mentioned, dinosaurs and astronomy, respectively, along with accompanying activities. Selecting Rem's gift proved most challenging. Our relationship existed in an undefined space, more than strictly professional but not quite personal in the conventional sense. After much deliberation, I found a limited edition print from a local artist whose work featured architectural elements of our city's historic districts, something that nodded to his appreciation for structural design without being overly intimate. On Tuesday, our last day before the office closed, we finalized outstanding projects and prepared for the brief shutdown. At 5, Rem gathered everyone for an informal toast, thanking them for their contributions and wishing them restful holidays. As the group dispersed, he approached my desk. "All set for tomorrow?" he asked. "Just about," I replied, closing my laptop. "Last-minute packing tonight and I'll be ready." "Perfect. I'll pick you up around 9 if that works." "9 is fine. I'll text you my address." He hesitated momentarily. "Sarah, if you've had second thoughts about any of this, it's completely fine. No pressure or expectations." The offer of an easy exit was thoughtful but unnecessary. "No second thoughts," I assured him. "But thank you for checking." He nodded, appearing satisfied with my response. "See you tomorrow then." That evening, as I packed for Vermont, my phone rang with my mother's number. I considered letting it go to voicemail but decided that avoidance wasn't serving either of us. Time to address things directly. "Hello, Mom." Sarah, finally. Her voice held the familiar note of exasperation she reserved for situations where her will encountered resistance. "We need to settle this Christmas situation. Your father and I have discussed it, and we're willing to adjust our plans to accommodate yours." The phrasing was telling. They were willing to accommodate me, as if my inclusion required special concession rather than being the natural default. "That's not necessary," I replied evenly. "As I mentioned, I've made other arrangements. Yes, with your boss, which is highly inappropriate." What will people think? I'm not particularly concerned with what people will think about how I spend my holiday. She made a sound of frustration. "This isn't like you, Sarah. You've always been the reasonable one, the one we could count on not to create drama." The characterization stung with its accuracy. I had been the reasonable one, the compliant daughter who adjusted her needs and suppressed her feelings to maintain family harmony. The one who could be counted on to accept less than she deserved, without complaint. "Perhaps you never really knew me," I said quietly. "Or perhaps I'm finally allowing myself to be the person I've always been beneath the performance of reasonableness you've come to expect." What does that even mean? You're speaking in riddles now. It means I'm no longer willing to accept exclusion as protection or rejection as love. It means I'm spending Christmas with people who want me there, not people who view my presence as an inconvenience to be managed. "That's unfair," she protested. "We never said you were an inconvenience." Not in those exact words, no. But actions communicate more clearly than words, Mom. And your actions made your priorities abundantly clear. A heavy silence followed, broken eventually by my mother's sigh. "I don't recognize you anymore. First the divorce, now this uncharacteristic stubbornness." "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, genuinely regretful for her inability to see beyond her own narrative. "I hope you, Dad, and Ashley have a lovely Christmas. We can talk in the new year when emotions aren't so heightened." "So that's it? You're choosing strangers over family?" "I'm choosing respect over conditional acceptance. I'm choosing to be where I'm wanted rather than where I'm merely tolerated." Another silence, this one longer and heavier with unspoken history. "Fine," she finally said, her tone resigned. "Do what you need to do, Sarah. But don't expect us to rearrange our lives again when you eventually change your mind." The conversation ended shortly after, leaving me with mixed emotions. Sadness for the continued misunderstanding, but also a quiet pride in maintaining my boundaries despite intense pressure to abandon them. It was progress, painful, but necessary. I finished packing methodically, selecting clothing appropriate for both outdoor activities and cozy evenings by the fire. The practical task grounded me after the emotional turbulence of the conversation with my mother. When everything was prepared, I took a final look around my apartment, ensuring lights were adjusted for my absence and plants were watered. On my nightstand sat the journal I'd begun keeping since the night of the holiday party. I opened it to a fresh page and wrote, "Tomorrow I step into the unknown, a Christmas entirely different from any I've experienced before. I'm nervous but also excited. Whatever happens, I'm proud of myself for choosing authenticity over appeasement, even when that choice was difficult. The Sarah who returns from Vermont will be stronger than the one who leaves." I slept surprisingly well, waking before my alarm to morning sunlight filtering through partially open blinds. After a leisurely shower and light breakfast, I was ready when my doorbell rang precisely at 9. Rem stood in the hallway looking relaxed in jeans and a charcoal sweater, a marked contrast to his usual office attire. "Good morning," he greeted me with a warm smile. "Ready for the Vermont adventure?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, gesturing to my suitcase and a box containing the carefully wrapped gifts. Though I may have gone overboard with presents. Not possible by Archer family standards, we're enthusiastic gift givers. He picked up my suitcase. "Car's right out front. I managed to find a legal parking spot, but we shouldn't test our luck with Boston traffic enforcement." The drive to Vermont took just under 4 hours, transforming gradually from urban landscape to rolling countryside to the more dramatic terrain of the Green Mountains. Conversation flowed easily between comfortable silences as we covered topics, ranging from work projects to books we'd recently read to childhood holiday memories. Rem shared stories of Archer family traditions, the Christmas Eve bonfire where everyone tossed in a written regret from the past year, the elaborate breakfast his mother prepared each Christmas morning, the annual family photo that invariably included at least one person making an inappropriate face. "Fair warning," he said as we passed into Vermont. "My family is generally wonderful, but entirely lacking in formality or pretense. My mother will ask inappropriately personal questions. My father will attempt to engage you in philosophical debates. My brother will try to recruit you for whatever extreme sport he's currently obsessed with. And my sister-in-law will offer unsolicited but surprisingly accurate life advice. The kids are actually the most normal among us." I laughed, finding his candid description reassuring rather than alarming. "They sound real. After years of Mitchell family performances, real. Sounds refreshing." "They are that," he agreed. "To a fault, sometimes." As we ventured deeper into Vermont, the landscape grew increasingly dramatic. Mountains rising on either side, forests thick with evergreens, occasional farmhouses nestled in valleys. Snow covered everything in pristine white, glistening in the winter sunlight. The scene matched my mental image of a quintessential New England Christmas with almost cliched perfection. "It's beautiful," I murmured, watching the scenery pass outside my window. "Wait until you see it from the lodge," Rem said. "The view from the main living room is why my grandfather chose that specific plot of land. He always said he wanted to live inside the postcard, not just visit it occasionally." We turned onto progressively smaller roads until finally entering a private drive, marked only with a simple wooden sign reading Archer Lodge. The driveway wound through thick forest, before opening to reveal a clearing where a substantial log structure stood against the backdrop of Mount Mansfield. The lodge was larger than I'd anticipated, a 2-story main building with what appeared to be additional wings extending on either side. Natural stone and weathered timber combined to create a structure that seemed to emerge organically from the landscape while still conveying subtle elegance. Smoke curled from a central chimney, and holiday lights twinkled along the roofline despite the daylight hour. "Home for the holidays," Rem said as he parked beside several other vehicles. "Looks like everyone's already here." Before we could exit the car, the front door opened and a woman emerged. Tall and slender, with Rem's dark hair threaded with silver, dressed in a crimson sweater and jeans. She waved enthusiastically as we got out of the car. "Right on time," she called, approaching with quick steps despite the snow. I just put lunch on the table. Mom, this is Sarah Mitchell, Rem said as she reached us. Sarah, my mother, Diane Archer. Instead of the handshake I'd expected, Diane pulled me into a warm embrace. Finally, Remington has mentioned you for years, but never brought you to meet us. Welcome to Archer Lodge. Thank you for having me, I replied, slightly overwhelmed by her enthusiastic welcome. It's beautiful here. Wait until you see inside, she said, linking her arm through mine as if we were old friends. Robert, that's Rem's father. Just got the main fireplace going properly. The first day is always a negotiation between him and that chimney. She guided me toward the entrance while Rem followed with my luggage and the gift box, an amused expression on his face. Mom, maybe let Sarah actually enter the house before you start the full Archer immersion experience? Diane waved dismissively. Nonsense. Sarah doesn't want to stand on ceremony, do you, dear? Not at all, I assured her, finding her direct approach refreshingly genuine after years of my mother's careful social choreography. The interior of the lodge exceeded even the exterior's promise. Soaring ceilings supported by massive timber beams, a central stone fireplace large enough to stand in, walls of windows framing the mountain view Rem had mentioned. The decor balanced, rustic elements with comfortable luxury, leather sofas and chairs arranged for conversation, bookshelves filled to capacity, artwork that appeared to be family-created alongside professional pieces. A man rose from one of the sofas as we entered, tall like Rem but broader, with a full beard shot through with gray and observant eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Robert, come meet Sarah, Diane called unnecessarily as he was already approaching. Welcome to our sanctuary, he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. I hope the drive wasn't too tedious. Rem tends to obey speed limits with suspicious precision. Unlike some people who consider them optional suggestions, Rem countered, good-naturedly setting down my luggage. Where are Jake and Charlotte? Outside with the kids, Robert replied. Tobias convinced them that building a snow fort before lunch was absolutely essential to Homeland security. Your nephew has a future in persuasive rhetoric, Diane explained, to me. Or possibly international espionage. We haven't quite decided which he's better suited for. The easy banter among them created an immediate atmosphere of warmth and inclusion. These people clearly enjoyed each other's company, a stark contrast to the performance of family harmony that characterized Mitchell gatherings. Lunch is ready whenever everyone gets here, Diane continued. But first, let's get you settled. Rem, show Sarah to the East guest room. I put fresh towels in the ensuite and extra blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed. As Rem led me up a wooden staircase to the second floor, I whispered, Your mother is wonderful. He smiled. She is, subtle as a sledgehammer, but genuine in everything she does. The East guest room proved to be a charming space with sloped ceilings, a queen-sized bed covered in a handmade quilt, and windows that offered views of both the mountains and the surrounding forest. Like the rest of the lodge, it balanced rustic elements with thoughtful comforts. Bathrooms through there, Rem indicated a door in the corner. Take your time settling in. No rush or schedule here. It's all so lovely, I said, genuinely, moved by the care evident in every detail. Thank you for including me in this. Thank you for coming, he replied simply. I'll see you downstairs when you're ready. Left alone, I took a moment to absorb my surroundings and the surreal quality of the situation. Just weeks ago, I'd been devastated by my family's rejection, feeling unwanted and excluded during what should be the most inclusive season. Now I found myself welcomed with genuine warmth into this beautiful home by people who had no obligation to me whatsoever. I unpacked quickly, changed into fresh clothes, and fixed my hair before heading downstairs. Voices and laughter guided me to a spacious dining area where a large wooden table was set for lunch. Diane was arranging a final dish as Robert poured wine into glasses. Rem stood conversing with a man who could only be his brother, similar. Height and build but with lighter hair and a more athletic bearing, and a woman with auburn hair cut in a stylish bob. 2 children, a boy and a girl who appeared to be the ages Rem had mentioned, were setting napkins at each place with the exaggerated care of those given an important task. "Sarah!" Diane called, spotting me in the doorway. "Come meet the rest of the family." Rem's brother extended his hand. "Jake Archer, I've heard entirely too much about you." The woman beside him rolled her eyes affectionately. "Ignore him. I'm Charlotte. We're delighted you could join us." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, also grateful to not be the only non-Archer by blood at the table. They can be overwhelming en masse. "I'm Tobias," the boy announced importantly, stepping forward. "I'm 8 3/4. "Very pleased to meet you, Tobias," I replied, with matching formality. "That's a very impressive age." "This is my sister Ellie," he continued, indicating the girl who offered a shy wave. "She's only 10, but she's okay sometimes." "High praise," Jake commented, ruffling his son's hair. "Coming from him, that's practically a declaration of eternal devotion." "Dad," Tobias protested, ducking away with the universal embarrassment of children confronted with parental humor. "Everyone sit," Diane directed, gesturing to the table. "Food's getting cold." I found myself seated between Rem and Ellie, with Robert at the head of the table and Diane opposite him. The meal itself was simple but delicious. Homemade soup, freshly baked bread, and a colorful salad. Conversation flowed naturally, covering topics from the children's school activities to Jake's recent rock climbing expedition to Charlotte's work as an environmental attorney. What struck me most was how they genuinely listened to each other. When Ellie shyly mentioned a science project she was working on, everyone gave her their full attention. When Robert described a book he'd recently finished, others asked thoughtful questions. Even Tobias's elaborate theories about optimal snow fort construction were met with serious consideration rather than dismissive indulgence. "Sarah," Diane said during a lull, "Rem tells us you've just received a well-deserved promotion. Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, touched that he'd shared this with his family. "It's an exciting opportunity." "Rem never promotes based on anything but merit," Robert commented. "He gets that stubborn integrity from his mother." Says the man who once refused a major architectural commission because the client wanted to cut corners on environmental standards. Diane countered with affectionate exasperation. Their easy acknowledgement of each other's strengths without false modesty or exaggerated praise created an atmosphere of authentic appreciation. It was refreshing, and somewhat disorienting after years in environments where compliments were either withheld entirely or offered with strategic calculation. After lunch, Jake and Charlotte took the children outside for promised sledding, while Diane insisted that Rem give me a proper tour of the lodge. Robert claimed he needed to commune with the fireplace to ensure it continued functioning optimally. My father's relationship with that fireplace is the longest-running drama in Archer family history, Rem explained as we began our tour. "They've been locked in a battle of wills since I was a child." "Your family is wonderful," I said, as we walked through a game room filled with well-worn board games and playing cards. "Genuinely wonderful." "They have their moments," he acknowledged with a smile. "But yes, I'm fortunate. We're not perfect by any means, but there's a foundation of absolute acceptance that allows for authenticity." "That's it exactly," I said, recognizing the quality I'd been trying to identify. "There's no performance here, no carefully maintained facade. Everyone just is." "It wasn't always this way," Rem admitted as we continued through a cozy library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "My parents went through a difficult period when Jake and I were teenagers. They separated for nearly a year, and things were tense and uncomfortable. The revelation surprised me. The Archers seemed so harmonious that imagining serious discord between them was difficult." "What changed?" I asked. "They did the hard work of recognizing patterns that weren't serving them," They got counseling, had difficult conversations, and ultimately decided that their relationship was worth fighting for, not just for our sake, but for their own. He paused, considering. I think that experience is partly why our family values authenticity so highly now. They learned that real connection requires genuine presence, not performance. The parallel to my own family's preference for appearance over substance was striking. While the Mitchells maintained a flawless exterior regardless of interior reality, the Archers had chosen the messier but more rewarding path of authentic engagement. That's courageous, I observed. Most people avoid that level of honesty because it's painful. It is painful, Rem agreed. But my parents would tell you the alternative. Living disconnected lives behind perfect facades is ultimately more painful in the long run. The conversation felt surprisingly intimate, given our technically professional relationship, yet somehow appropriate to our unique circumstances. As we completed the tour in a sun-filled conservatory filled with Diane's impressive collection of houseplants, I found myself wondering how I'd ever return to the careful boundaries of our office interactions after experiencing this deeper connection. Thank you for sharing your family with me, I said as we paused to admire the mountain view through the conservatory's glass walls. I keep saying that, I know, but I truly mean it. This is healing, somehow. Rem's expression softened. I'm glad. That was the hope. A comfortable silence settled between us, filled with unspoken understanding and possibilities I wasn't quite ready to examine closely. The foundation of our professional relationship remained solid, but something new was being constructed alongside it, something personal and potentially transformative. Outside, we could hear the children's laughter as they sledded down a gentle slope behind the lodge. Inside, the scent of pine boughs and cinnamon created an atmosphere of festive warmth. For the first time since signing my divorce papers, I felt genuinely present rather than simply enduring, engaged in the moment rather than analyzing the past or anxiously anticipating the future. Whatever came after this unexpected holiday interlude, I knew with absolute certainty that my initial devastation at being excluded from my family's Christmas had ultimately led me exactly where I needed to be, not just geographically, but emotionally and spiritually. Sometimes rejection creates space for something far more valuable than what was lost. The real question now was what would happen when the holiday ended and we returned to our normal lives, and whether the connection developing between Rem and me could translate beyond the magical confines of Archer Lodge into the complex reality waiting beyond these snow-covered mountains. Christmas Eve at Archer Lodge dawned with pristine beauty. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, coating the already white landscape with an additional layer of perfection. I woke early, the unfamiliar bed and environment disrupting my usual sleep patterns. Rather than trying to force more rest, I slipped quietly from my room, wrapping myself in the plush robe Diane had thoughtfully provided. The main floor was silent, the large living area illuminated only by the twinkling lights of the massive Christmas tree in the corner and the dying embers in the fireplace. Through the wall of windows, the mountains were just becoming visible. In the pre-dawn light, their silhouettes emerging from darkness like a photograph slowly developing. I made my way to the kitchen, intending to prepare coffee, only to find Robert already there, measuring grounds into an elaborate coffee maker. Early riser too? He asked, glancing up with a smile. Diane claims it's a character flaw, but I've always thought morning people have the advantage of seeing the world before it puts on its daytime facade. I don't usually wake this early, I admitted, but there's something about this place that makes you want to catch every possible moment. He nodded as if this made perfect sense. The mountains have that effect. They make human concerns seem simultaneously more significant and less burdensome. Paradoxical but true. There was something of Rem in his thoughtful articulation. Or perhaps it was the other way around, with Rem having inherited his father's philosophical bent. Coffee will be ready in about 5 minutes, he continued. The good viewing spot for sunrise is in the conservatory. The eastern exposure captures first light perfectly. Taking his suggestion, I settled into a comfortable chair in the plant-filled space, wrapping my robe tighter against the slight chill. The large windows offered an unobstructed view of the mountains as they gradually emerged from darkness, the snow reflecting the changing light in subtle gradations of color, from deep blue to lavender to the first hints of pink. Robert appeared, with 2 steaming mugs, handing one to me before taking a seat nearby. "Diane will be down in about an hour," he said. "She claims to hate mornings but never misses making Christmas Eve breakfast. The others won't emerge until they smell bacon." We sat in comfortable silence, watching as sunrise transformed the landscape. The pink glow intensified to amber, then brilliant gold as the sun finally crested the mountain ridge, sending shafts of light through the trees and making the snow sparkle as if embedded with diamonds. "Worth waking up for," Robert commented, quietly. "Absolutely," I agreed, sipping the excellent coffee. "Do you do this every morning while you're here?" "Without fail. It's a form of meditation for me. Reminds me that beauty exists independent of human achievement or failure. The mountains don't care about architectural awards or business success or social status. They simply are, and in their presence, we're invited to simply be as well." The observation resonated deeply, articulating something I'd sensed but hadn't fully formed into conscious thought. The natural magnificence surrounding us existed completely separate from human metrics of value or success. It neither judged nor validated. It simply was, constant and indifferent to our human dramas. "Rem mentioned that you and Diane went through a difficult period when the boys were teenagers," I said, surprising myself with the personal direction of conversation, "that you separated for a time." If Robert was taken aback by this topic, he didn't show it. "We did. Nearly lost everything that mattered because we were too focused on what didn't." He took a thoughtful sip of coffee. "I was building my architectural practice, consumed with proving myself professionally. Diane was expanding her psychology practice while managing most of our family life. We were successful on paper, but failing at the things that actually mattered." "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious about how they'd navigated a challenge that destroyed many marriages. "Honesty," he said simply. "Brutal, uncomfortable. Honesty about what we actually wanted versus what we thought we should want, about the people we'd become versus the people we aspired to be." He gestured toward the mountains. "We came here, actually, spent a week in complete isolation, talking more directly than we had in years. It was painful, letting go of carefully, constructed images and admitting to disappointments and resentments. But worth it, obviously," I observed, "beyond measure. We discovered that beneath the accumulated grievances and misunderstandings, we still genuinely liked each other. And that liking, even more than loving, is what sustains a relationship through difficulties." He gave me a sidelong glance. "I suspect you've discovered that distinction in your own experience." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. As my marriage deteriorated, I'd continued loving James in some form while gradually losing the fundamental liking that had once characterized our relationship. The activities we enjoyed together, the conversations that energized us, the mutual respect for each other's perspectives, those had eroded long before the final betrayal. "I have," I acknowledged, though not until it was too late to salvage anything. "Then you've gained wisdom at considerable cost. The question becomes how you'll invest that wisdom moving forward." Before I could respond, footsteps on the stairs signaled others were stirring. Robert smiled. "And so begins the Archer family Christmas Eve. Brace yourself for organized chaos, excessive food, and traditions of questionable origin, but undeniable enthusiasm." The day unfolded exactly as he'd predicted. Diane appeared in the kitchen wearing a Santa hat and apron, commandeering the space for an elaborate breakfast production that somehow accommodated everyone's preferences while maintaining festive presentation. The children descended next, Tobias wearing pajamas covered in dinosaurs wearing Santa hats, Ellie in a nightgown featuring constellations with added holiday lights. Jake and Charlotte arrived looking sleep-rumpled but happy, followed shortly by Rem, whose good morning smile in my direction carried warmth that seemed to extend beyond simple courtesy. Within an hour, the quiet contemplation of early morning had transformed into lively family breakfast, with multiple conversations happening simultaneously and frequent laughter. "Pancakes shaped like Christmas trees," Diane announced, presenting a platter with flourish. "A tradition since the boys were small, though I've improved considerably since the early attempts, which Jake once described as radioactive waste with syrup." "I stand by that assessment," Jake retorted good-naturedly. "The 1992 Christmas pancakes could have been classified as a biohazard. Yet you ate 6 of them," Rem pointed out. "I was a growing boy with no sense of self-preservation." The easy banter continued throughout breakfast, with stories and inside jokes that could have made me feel excluded, but somehow didn't. Perhaps because each reference was quickly explained, each memory contextualized to include me in the understanding, if not the experience itself. After breakfast came what Diane called Operation Decoration, the final preparation of the lodge for Christmas Day. While the tree had been trimmed earlier, there were still garlands to hang, stockings to arrange, and outdoor lights to check. Everyone participated, with assigned tasks that apparently reflected established skills and preferences. "Sarah, you're with me on garland duty," Charlotte said, handing me one end of a fragrant pine bough wrapped with ribbon. "Rem mentioned you have an eye for detail, and this requires precision to avoid the lopsided disaster of 2019. We agreed never to speak of the leaning garland of Christmas past," Jake called from across the room, where he was untangling outdoor light strands with Tobias. "I made no such agreement," Charlotte replied with a grin. "Some failures should be remembered as cautionary tales." As we worked together draping the garland along the staircase, Charlotte spoke softly enough that only I could hear. "The Archers can be overwhelming initially. They mean well, but subtlety isn't their strong suit. If you need a breather at any point, just say you're helping me with something kitchen-related. I've established myself as the one person who can ban others from culinary spaces when necessary." The thoughtful offer touched me. "Thank you, but honestly, this is wonderful, so different from my family gatherings." She nodded, understanding. "Rem mentioned your parents excluded you from their Christmas this year. That's beyond hurtful. I'm sorry you experienced that." The simple acknowledgement of the pain without attempt to minimize or explain it away was unexpectedly powerful. "Thank you," I said, blinking away sudden moisture in my eyes. "For what it's worth, their loss is our gain. It's nice having another person here who appreciates the Archer's particular brand of loving chaos without contributing to the genetic predisposition for impromptu philosophical debates." She smiled warmly. "Besides, it's good seeing Rem so relaxed. He carries too much responsibility too stoically most of the time." Her comment hinted at observations I wasn't sure how to interpret. Before I could formulate a response, Ellie approached, with craft supplies. "Aunt Charlotte, can you help me finish my ornament for the exchange tonight? I can't get the star to stay attached." "Duty calls," Charlotte said to me with a wink. Garland crisis averted for another year. The rest of the day passed in pleasant activity. After decorations were complete, Diane organized cookie decorating for anyone interested, which turned out to be everyone. The dining table became a creative battleground of colored frosting, sprinkles, and increasingly competitive designs. The annual Christmas cookie competition has no official judges or prizes, Rem explained as he meticulously outlined a snowflake. But unofficial bragging rights are fiercely defended. My mother's detailed rendition of the lodge has been undefeated. for 3 years running. Until today, Jake declared, hunched protectively over his creation. I've been practicing with Tobias's Play-Doh all year. My technique has improved significantly. Diane scoffed good-naturedly. Technique without vision is merely craft, not art. My lodge captures the spirit of our gathering place, not merely its physical form. And this is why normal families just use cookie cutters and call it a day, Charlotte commented dryly, helping Ellie create a surprisingly sophisticated night sky design. I found myself genuinely enjoying the creative process, attempting a mountain landscape inspired by the view that had so captivated me that morning. The activity was reminiscent of childhood pleasures long forgotten, the simple joy of creating without concern for perfection, of participating in something both individual and communal. As afternoon transitioned to evening, preparations began, for what Diane described as the casual feast before tomorrow's formal feast. Everyone contributed according to apparent tradition. Robert prepared mulled wine, Jake and Rem handled the main courses, Charlotte organized appetizers, while Diane created elaborate desserts. The children were responsible for table setting, approaching the task with ceremonial seriousness. "What can I do to help?" I asked, feeling suddenly awkward as the only non-contributor. "First-year guests are exempt from kitchen duty," Diane declared. "Lodge rules. Next year, you'll be assigned your culinary responsibility based on demonstrated skills and family needs." Her casual assumption that I would be part of next year's gathering created a strange flutter in my chest, partly pleasure at being so easily included in future plans, partly uncertainty about what that inclusion might signify regarding my evolving relationship with Rem. "However," she continued, "if you'd like to be useful, you could help Robert with the fire pit outside. The Christmas Eve bonfire is his domain, but he always appreciates an assistant while Rem and Jake are busy with dinner preparations." The suggestion offered perfect balance, allowing me to contribute while respecting established traditions. I found Robert on the back deck, arranging logs in a large stone fire pit. "Diane sent reinforcements?" he asked with a knowing smile. "She worries I'll create an inferno rather than a controlled blaze." I offered to help, I explained, pulling on my coat, though I should admit I have limited fire-building experience. "Excellent. Novices make the best assistants. No bad habits to unlearn?" He handed me smaller pieces of wood. "These go in the center, creating a teepee structure over the kindling." As we worked, Robert explained the bonfire tradition. We each write something we want to release from the past year: a regret, a disappointment, a limiting belief. During the bonfire ceremony, we read it aloud if we choose, then cast it into the flames. Symbolic, obviously, but powerful nonetheless. Should I participate?" I asked, uncertain of my place in this intimate ritual. "Only if it feels right," he assured me. "No pressure or expectation, but I suspect you might have something worth releasing into the fire after the year you've had." I nodded thoughtfully. There was indeed much I could symbolically relinquish to the flames: resentment toward James for his betrayal, anger at my family for their rejection, lingering self-doubt about my worth and lovability. The prospect of naming these burdens then, physically releasing them, held powerful appeal. By early evening, the lodge was transformed, holiday lights illuminating both interior and exterior, delicious aromas filling the kitchen, the fire pit prepared for later ceremony. I returned to my room briefly to change for dinner, selecting a simple but elegant sweater dress in deep burgundy. As I applied minimal makeup and arranged my hair, I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused, struck by the difference in my appearance from just weeks earlier. The woman looking back at me seemed more vibrant somehow, with color in her cheeks and brightness in her eyes that had been absent during the divorce proceedings and subsequent family conflict. It wasn't just physical. Something fundamental had shifted in my bearing. a quiet confidence replacing the cringing uncertainty that had characterized recent months. When I descended the stairs, conversations paused briefly as several pairs of eyes turned in my direction. Rem, emerging from the kitchen, stopped mid-sentence, his gaze meeting mine with an intensity that sent unexpected warmth through my body. "You look beautiful," Diane said matter-of-factly, breaking the momentary silence. "That color suits you perfectly." "Thank you," I replied, suddenly self-conscious under the collective attention. "Something smells amazing." "Jake's rosemary lamb," Charlotte explained, his one culinary accomplishment, but it's legitimately exceptional. Dinner was served family-style at the long table, now set with candles and evergreen centerpieces. The meal was indeed exceptional. Tender lamb, roasted vegetables, freshly baked bread, and several side dishes that complemented the main course perfectly. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and occasional good-natured disagreements. "Before dessert," Robert announced as the main course concluded, "we have the Christmas Eve gift exchange. One gift each, following the established protocol." The established protocol turned out to involve each person receiving a single gift, specifically selected to reflect a passion, interest, or meaningful experience from the past year. The children went first, their excitement barely contained, as they presented carefully wrapped packages to designated recipients. Tobias gave his father a book about extreme mountaineering with specific pages marked featuring climbs he thought Jake should attempt. Ellie presented Charlotte with handmade earrings created from tiny star charts laminated in resin. The adults exchanged equally thoughtful items, Diane receiving a first-edition psychology text she'd long admired from Robert, Jake giving Rem a vintage architectural drawing of the lodge's original design. I watched with growing admiration for the care, evident in each selection. These weren't expensive or ostentatious gifts, but rather tangible expressions of attention and understanding, proof that the givers had truly seen the recipients and honored their individual journeys. "Sarah," Diane said, extending a small package toward me. From all of us, though Rem did the actual selecting. Surprised and touched, I accepted the beautifully wrapped gift. "I wasn't expecting anything. This is so kind." "You can't participate in an Archer family Christmas without receiving an evening gift," Robert explained. "It's tradition, and we're nothing if not slaves to tradition around here." With careful fingers, I unwrapped the package to reveal a small velvet box. Inside nestled a delicate silver ornament in the shape of a door, slightly ajar with light spilling through the opening. Engraved on the frame were the words, "New Beginnings, Christmas 2024. "It's beautiful," I said softly, genuinely moved by the symbolic meaning and the thoughtfulness it represented. "The ornament tradition is important in your family," Rem mentioned, Diane explained. "We wouldn't want you to miss that aspect of Christmas, though our approach is admittedly different." Different indeed. Where Mitchell family ornaments were selected to showcase achievements or reinforce family image, this gift acknowledged my actual journey, the painful endings and hopeful beginnings that had characterized my year. It honored the truth of my experience rather than any carefully curated version of it. "Thank you," I said, looking around the table but allowing my gaze to linger on Rem. "This means more than I can adequately express." After dessert, individual, chocolate soufflés that emerged from the oven with perfect timing, the family bundled in warm clothes for the bonfire ceremony. Outside, the temperature had dropped considerably, stars emerging in breathtaking clarity against the black velvet sky. Robert lit the fire with ceremonial flourish, and soon flames danced high above the stone pit, casting golden light across the gathered faces. Small pieces of paper and pencils were distributed. "Write whatever you wish to release from this past year," Diane instructed. "Take your time. There's no rush." I stared at the blank paper, considering what to inscribe. So many possibilities crowded my mind. Specific resentments, particular fears, individual regrets. But as the fire crackled and the others wrote thoughtfully around me, I realized there was one core burden that encompassed all others. In careful letters, I wrote, I release the belief that I must earn love through performance or perfection. My worth is inherent, not achieved. One by one, family members stepped forward to share their releases. Jake relinquished fear of professional stagnation. Charlotte released resentment about a family conflict with her parents. Diane surrendered, worry about aging. Robert released regret over a friendship he'd neglected. The children's contributions were simpler, but no less meaningful. Tobias releasing anger about a lost soccer championship, Ellie surrendering self-consciousness about her academic abilities. When Rem's turn came, he paused before speaking. I release the walls I've built between personal and professional fulfillment. They've protected me from disappointment, but also prevented deeper connection. His gaze met mine briefly across the fire, the implication of his words sending a wave of warmth through me independent of the flames. When my turn came, I read my statement with clear voice despite the emotion tightening my throat. I release the belief that I must earn love through performance or perfection. My worth is inherent, not achieved. The words seemed to hang in the cold air for a moment before I tossed the paper into the fire, watching as flames consumed the written limitation. Something shifted within me as the paper turned to ash. Not magical transformation, but the tangible beginning of genuine change, a conscious rejection of the conditional love paradigm that had shaped so much of my life. As the ceremony concluded, conversations resumed more quietly than before, the shared vulnerability creating deeper connection. Eventually, the dropping temperature drove us back inside, where Diane served hot chocolate, fortified for adults, who aren't driving anywhere, with a splash of peppermint schnapps. The evening wound down naturally, with the children finally succumbing to exhaustion despite protests about Santa's impending arrival. After helping with minimal cleanup, I found myself on the back deck again, drawn to the still glowing embers of the bonfire. Wrapped in a borrowed blanket against the cold, I watched as occasional sparks rose toward the star-filled sky. Mind some company? Rem's voice came from behind me. Not at all, I replied, shifting to make space on the wooden bench. He settled beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. For several minutes we sat in comfortable silence, watching the dying fire and the brilliant stars above. Thank you for the ornament, I said finally. It's perfect. I hoped you'd like it. When Mom mentioned our gift exchange tradition, I wanted to find something meaningful rather than merely nice. You succeeded, I assured him. Though I feel somewhat guilty not having individual gifts for everyone tonight. The lodge gifts are tomorrow morning's tradition, he explained. Tonight is family-specific. No one expected reciprocation. Family-specific? The words highlighted my ambiguous position, neither outsider nor truly family, occupying some undefined middle space that felt simultaneously precarious and full of potential. Your family makes it easy to forget I've known them less than 24 hours, I observed. They have a remarkable capacity for authentic welcome. They recognize kindred spirits, Rem said simply. People who value substance over appearance, truth over comfort, connection over convention. Is that how you see me? I asked, surprised by my own directness. He turned slightly to face me, expression serious in the faint light from the dying fire. It's how I've always seen you, Sarah. From our first professional interaction, I recognized something beyond your excellent work. An integrity that wouldn't compromise for convenience. An authenticity that persisted despite pressure to conform. It's what makes you exceptional at building client relationships. And what makes you, he hesitated briefly, valuable beyond professional contexts. The careful phrasing acknowledged the boundary we were approaching without explicitly crossing it. In the silence that followed, I felt the weight of unspoken possibilities between us. Questions about what might exist beyond our working relationship. What could develop if we allowed ourselves to explore the connection that had been building long before this Christmas interlude? "I should go in," I said finally, not from discomfort, but from awareness that whatever was developing between us deserved more thoughtful exploration than a late-night conversation in near-freezing temperatures could provide. "Tomorrow will be a full day from what I understand." "Archer family Christmas is indeed a marathon, not a sprint," he agreed with a smile, standing and offering his hand to help me up. I accepted both his assistance and the momentary contact it provided, my gloved hand fitting naturally in his larger one. As we walked back toward the lodge, our shoulders occasionally brushing, I felt a sense of rightness that transcended the holiday setting or the extraordinary circumstances that had brought me here. Whatever happened next, whether our connection developed beyond professional bounds or remained in this liminal space of possibility, I knew with increasing certainty that my mother's rejection had ultimately directed me toward exactly where I needed to be. Not just for Christmas, but for the next phase of my journey toward authentic selfhood and genuine connection. As we reached the door, Rem paused, his expression thoughtful in the soft glow of holiday lights. "I'm glad you're here, Sarah." "So, am I?" I replied with complete honesty. "More than I can adequately express." We entered the warmth of the lodge together, the simple exchange carrying more significance than the words alone might suggest. Tomorrow would bring Christmas Day with all its traditions and expectations, but something far more meaningful than seasonal celebration was already unfolding. A transformation neither of us had anticipated, but both were increasingly willing to embrace. Christmas morning at Archer Lodge began with the gentle sound of snow falling against my window. I woke slowly, disoriented momentarily by unfamiliar surroundings, before remembering where I was and why. The events of the previous day, the warm welcome, the thoughtful ornament, the bonfire ceremony, and especially the quiet conversation with Rem under the stars, felt almost dreamlike in the soft morning light. A glance at my phone showed it was just past 7. No messages from my family, which shouldn't have surprised me but still created a small pang of sadness. I pushed the feeling aside, determined not to let old patterns diminish this unexpected gift of genuine inclusion. After a quick shower, I dressed in a comfortable sweater and leggings. Diane had emphasized that Christmas morning was strictly casual, with everyone remaining in pajamas or comfortable clothes until the afternoon. The silver door ornament caught my eye as I was leaving the room, and on impulse, I tucked it into my pocket, finding comfort in its symbolic weight. The main floor was quiet when I descended the stairs, though the scent of fresh coffee indicated someone was already awake. In the kitchen, I found Diane wearing the same Santa hat from yesterday, albeit now paired with flannel pajamas and a plush robe. "Merry Christmas, Sarah," she greeted warmly. "You're the second one up. Rem's in the conservatory with coffee. He's always been an early riser, even as a child. Used to drive us crazy on Christmas morning, sitting by our bed at 5 a.m., staring. Until we woke up." "Merry Christmas," I replied, accepting the mug she offered. "That's hard to imagine. Rem seems so patient now." "Oh, he grew into that quality through considerable effort," she said with a knowing smile. "Beneath that composed exterior still beats the heart of an impatient boy who wants everything to happen on his timetable. He's just learned to channel it productively." She gave me a gentle nudge toward the doorway. "Go join him. I've got breakfast preparations to oversee, and he's terrible at helping in the kitchen anyway." Following her suggestion, I made my way to the conservatory where Rem sat exactly as his father had the previous morning, watching the sunrise illuminate the snow-covered landscape. He turned as I entered, his smile warming me more effectively than the coffee in my hands. "Merry Christmas," he said, gesturing to the chair beside him. "Sleep well?" "Very. Merry Christmas to you, too." I settled into the indicated seat, curling, my legs beneath me. Your mother mentioned you were notorious for early rising on Christmas. He laughed softly. She loves sharing embarrassing childhood anecdotes with guests. It's her superpower. It's sweet, I countered. Makes you human, rather than just the impressive CEO everyone at work sees. Is that how people see me? He asked, looking genuinely curious. Absolutely. You're respected, certainly, but also somewhat, I don't know, mythologized? The brilliant founder who built an exceptional company while remaining decent and ethical. It creates a certain aura. That's mildly terrifying, he admitted. I'm just trying to build something worthwhile while treating people properly. Nothing mythological about it. That combination is rare enough in business to seem almost legendary, I pointed out. Most leaders sacrifice either innovation or humanity. You've managed to maintain both. He looked slightly uncomfortable with the praise. I've made plenty of mistakes along the way. Ask Jake about the first iteration of Archer Innovations, complete disaster that nearly bankrupted me. I didn't know you had an earlier version of the company. Most people don't. When I was 28, I launched what I thought would be revolutionary educational software. Invested everything I had, convinced several friends to join me, worked 18-hour days for 2 years, and watched it collapse spectacularly when our main investor pulled out just before launch. The revelation surprised me. In the 6 years I'd worked for Rem, he'd never mentioned this earlier failure. What happened afterward? I asked. I spent 6 months redesigning everything from scratch, focusing on what had actually worked rather than what I thought should work. Started smaller, built more gradually, listened to clients rather than assuming I knew what they needed. He smiled ruefully. The standard entrepreneur's journey, spectacular failure followed by humbler success. You never mentioned this at work. It's not particularly relevant to our current operations, he said with a slight shrug, though maybe it should be. Acknowledging past failures creates space for necessary risks. Our conversation paused as the sun finally crested the mountain ridge, sending brilliant light across the pristine snow. The sight was breathtaking. Nature's own Christmas display more magnificent than any human decoration could achieve. I have something for you, Rem said after a moment, reaching beside his chair to retrieve a small package I hadn't noticed. Not part of the formal gift exchange later, just something I wanted you to have. Surprised, I accepted the simply wrapped box. I have something for you too, actually. It's upstairs with the other gifts. This isn't a reciprocal expectation, he clarified. Just open it. Inside the box, nestled in tissue paper, I found a leather-bound journal of exceptional quality. The cover buttery soft and the pages thick, creamy paper lined with silver. A silver pen was attached to the spine with a delicate chain. I noticed, you've been writing more since. He hesitated, then continued. Recent events. Thought you might appreciate a dedicated space for that practice. The pen is refillable, designed to last decades with proper care. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched me deeply. He had noticed my renewed journaling habit, something I hadn't explicitly mentioned to anyone, and responded with a gift that honored both the practice and its longevity. Not a temporary distraction from pain, but a tool for ongoing growth and reflection. It's perfect, I said softly, running my fingers over the supple leather. Truly perfect, thank you. You're welcome. Writing has always helped me process complex situations. Figured it might serve you similarly. Before I could respond, sounds of movement from upstairs signaled the rest of the household was awakening. Rem smiled, a boyish excitement replacing his usual composed demeanor. And now the Archer family Christmas officially begins, he said, standing. Prepare yourself for orchestrated chaos. His description proved entirely accurate. Within 30 minutes, the peaceful morning transformed into joyful commotion. The children descended first, barely contained excitement propelling them toward the Christmas tree where wrapped packages awaited. Jake and Charlotte followed, carrying mugs of coffee and looking amusedly resigned to the early hour. Robert appeared last, his hair slightly disheveled but his smile welcoming. "No presents until breakfast," Diane announced firmly, directing everyone toward the dining area where an impressive spread awaited: French toast casserole, bacon, fresh fruit, and pastries arranged with artistic flair. "Mom's Christmas breakfast is non-negotiable," Rem whispered to me as we took our seats. "The one tradition that has never been modified, questioned, or abbreviated." Breakfast was consumed with unusual speed given its quality. Enthusiastic conversation focusing almost entirely on speculation about gifts and gentle teasing about past Christmas surprises, both successful and questionable. "Remember the year Dad got Mom that high-tech blender she never once used?" Jake reminisced with a grin. "It wasn't the blender that was the problem," Diane countered. "It was the implication that I should be making more smoothies at 5 a.m. before work." "In my defense," Robert said, raising his hands in mock surrender, "the sales associate assured me it was silent enough not to wake sleeping family members." "Nothing that pulverizes frozen fruit is genuinely silent," Diane retorted, though her fond expression belied any actual annoyance. Current appliance marketers' claims notwithstanding. The easy banter continued as breakfast concluded and everyone migrated to the living room, where the massive tree surrounded by wrapped gifts awaited. Unlike the regimented gift opening of my childhood home, where packages were distributed and opened one at a time with appropriate exclamations of gratitude, regardless of actual enthusiasm, the Archer approach appeared delightfully organic. Diane and Robert settled on the large sofa, supervising the children's distribution of gifts to their recipients. Once each person had their designated pile, opening commenced simultaneously with enthusiastic commentary and frequent pauses to admire or explain particular items. My own stack was surprisingly substantial, thoughtful gifts from each family member. From Jake and Charlotte, a collection of artisanal teas and a handcrafted mug. From the children, handmade items, a painted ornament from Ellie, and a surprisingly competent wooden penholder from Tobias. From Diane and Robert, a beautiful cashmere scarf in a shade of blue that complemented my coloring perfectly. "How did you possibly have time to get all these?" I asked Diane when thanking her. "You only knew I was coming days ago." "Amazon. Prime and local shops with extended hours," she replied with a wink. "Plus, I keep a few versatile gifts on hand for unexpected situations. The scarf was intended for my sister, but she'll never know the difference." The candid admission made me laugh. A Mitchell would have sooner died than admit a gift hadn't been specifically selected weeks in advance for its recipient, regardless of reality. When present opening concluded, the living room resembled a festive disaster zone. Discarded wrapping paper, empty boxes, and new acquisitions covering every surface. Instead of immediate cleanup, however, the family transitioned to what Robert called Christmas morning decompression, a period where everyone enjoyed their gifts, snacked on leftovers from breakfast, and relaxed in comfortable disarray. I found myself on a window seat, admiring my new journal while watching occasional snowflakes drift past the glass. The contrast between this Christmas and what I would have experienced at my parents' home couldn't have been more stark, where Mitchell celebrations were performances of perfection, gifts selected for appearance rather than meaning, conversations carefully curated to highlight achievements, emotions managed for appropriate display. The Archer gathering embraced authentic experience in all its messy, joyful reality. "Penny for your thoughts," Rem said, joining me with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Just appreciating the difference between this and my usual Christmas," I admitted, accepting the offered beverage. "It's like comparing a carefully staged photograph to a candid shot. Both show the same subjects, but only one captures genuine life." He nodded understanding. I've experienced enough corporate events masquerading as celebrations to know exactly what you mean. The exhaustion of maintaining appearance at the expense of experience. Exactly. My family excels at creating Christmas cards rather than Christmas memories. Their loss, he said simply. Authenticity is always more valuable than perfection. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow that had begun falling more steadily. Through the window, the world transformed into a monochrome landscape of white against darker evergreens, beautiful in its stark simplicity. I hate to interrupt this peaceful moment, Rem said eventually, but I should warn you that Phase 2 of Archer Christmas is approaching. Around noon, extended family and close friends will start arriving for the afternoon gathering. It gets considerably more crowded and chaotic. How many people are coming? I asked, suddenly aware that I'd be meeting a much wider circle than anticipated. Usually around 30, he replied with a slight grimace. Aunts, uncles, cousins, friends who've become honorary family members over the years. Mom's been hosting this open house since before Jake and I were born. Do I need to prepare somehow? I wasn't sure exactly what I was asking, whether I needed different clothes, rehearsed explanations for my presence, or simply mental preparation for meeting so many strangers. Rem seemed to understand the unspoken concerns. Just be yourself. No one will question your presence or require explanation. The Archer Extended Circle operates on a simple principle. If you're here, you belong here. His reassurance calmed my anxiety, though I still excused myself to change into something slightly more presentable than my current casual attire. In my room, I selected a forest green sweater and dark jeans. Festive without being formal, appropriate for a family, gathering without suggesting excessive effort. As I was fastening a simple silver necklace, my phone chimed with an incoming message. Expecting perhaps a delayed holiday greeting from a colleague, I was surprised to see my sister's name on the screen. The text was brief, but unexpected. Mom? Says you're in Vermont with your boss. What's really going on? Merry Christmas, BTW. The casual BTW addition to holiday wishes perfectly encapsulated Ashley's approach to our relationship. Familial connection as afterthought rather than priority. Still, the message represented more direct communication than we'd had in weeks. After consideration, I replied with simple honesty. Yes, spending Christmas with Rem Archer's family at their lodge near Stowe. They've been incredibly welcoming. Merry Christmas to you, Richard, and the family. Her response came quickly. Mom's upset. Says it's inappropriate. Dad's calming her down. No question about whether I was enjoying myself, no expression of genuine interest in my experience, just a report on our mother's disapproval. Classic Ashley, functioning as parental proxy rather than independent sister. I'm sorry she's upset, I replied after a moment. That wasn't my intention. I'm simply making the best of an unexpected situation. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared before her next message arrived. She's convinced you're dating your boss as revenge for her disinviting you. The assumption was so wildly inaccurate yet somehow perfectly aligned with my mother's worldview that I actually laughed. Aloud, of course she would interpret my acceptance of genuine kindness as calculated retaliation. It was how she herself operated, assigning strategic motivation to all human interaction. I'm not dating anyone, I replied, deciding simple facts were the best response. Rem kindly invited me to join his family when he learned I had no holiday plans. Nothing more complicated than that. Another pause, then. Mom says his family must think it's weird, you being there as his employee. My patience thinned at the continued focus on my mother's opinions rather than any genuine inquiry about my actual experience. His family has been extraordinarily welcoming, I wrote back. No one finds it weird or inappropriate. Please give everyone my love and best wishes for the holiday. I need to go now. Guests are arriving for Christmas dinner. I silenced my phone and placed it on the bedside table, determined not to let my family's limited perspective diminish the genuine joy of this unexpected Christmas experience. Whatever narrative my mother constructed about my absence was her creation, not my responsibility. When I returned downstairs, the transformation was already underway. Diane directed a small army of family members in preparation for the incoming guests. Additional chairs appeared from storage, serving tables were arranged with holiday linens, and platters of appetizers materialized from the kitchen. The entire operation proceeded with the efficient choreography of long practice, everyone seeming to know their assigned responsibilities without explicit direction. "Sarah," Diane called when she spotted me. "Perfect timing. Would you mind helping Charlotte with the beverage station? She's setting up in the sunroom." The simple inclusion in preparations, being assigned a task rather than treated as a guest to be served, reinforced my growing sense of belonging. In the sunroom, Charlotte was arranging an impressive selection of wines, spirits, and non-alcoholic options on a large table. "Reinforcements, excellent," she said as I approached. "Can you manage the ice buckets? We need 4, 2 for white wine, 1 for champagne, and 1 for the non-alcoholic sparkling cider." For the next hour, I worked alongside the Archers as they prepared for their extended gathering, feeling increasingly integrated into their holiday rhythm. By the time the first guests arrived, Robert's sister and her husband, followed quickly by longtime friends from Diane's psychology practice, the lodge was ready for celebration, transformed from intimate family space to welcoming community gathering. What struck me most as additional guests arrived was the genuine warmth of each interaction. Unlike the polite social choreography of Mitchell gatherings, where conversations followed predictable patterns of achievement reporting and appropriate inquiries, the Archer extended circle engaged with authentic interest and palpable affection. People genuinely wanted to hear each other's stories, celebrated real accomplishments without competitive undertones, and shared difficulties without shame or minimization. Several times throughout the afternoon, I found myself drawn into conversations with Rem's extended family or friends, introduced simply as Sarah, joining us from Boston, without elaborate explanation of my connection. No one questioned my presence, or seemed to find it unusual. I was simply accepted as part of the gathering, my contributions to conversations valued without qualification. "You seem to be holding up well under the Archer extended family onslaught," Rem commented, finding me near the fireplace after I'd been engaged in lengthy conversation with his aunt about her work in international education. "It's wonderful, actually," I replied honestly. "Everyone is so genuinely interested in actual exchange rather than social performance. Family legend claims my great-grandmother established the standard by throwing a fancy dessert at a particularly pretentious dinner guest," he said with a grin, supposedly declared that life was too short for false pleasantries and banned empty social niceties from Archer gatherings thereafter. "Effective strategy," I laughed. My great-grandmother was more likely to grade social interactions on deportment and proper conversational progression. "Hence your exceptional professional poise," he observed. "Though I've always appreciated when glimpses of the real Sarah break through that polished exterior." The comment caught me off guard, both the fact that he'd noticed my carefully constructed, professional demeanor and that he valued the authentic self beneath it. Before I could formulate a response, we were interrupted by the arrival of an older couple who greeted Rem with enthusiastic embrace. "Sarah, these are my godparents, Eleanor and Thomas Wilson," Rem explained after initial greetings. "They've been family friends since before I was born. Practically raised this one when Diane and Robert were figuring out their relationship troubles," Eleanor said, patting Rem's cheek affectionately. "He spent nearly a year with us during their separation." "Best year of my childhood," Rem replied with obvious affection. "First introduction to architectural drawing in Tom's studio. And to proper financial management," Thomas added with mock severity. The allowance negotiations of 1996 remain legendary in our household. As they continued reminiscing, I observed the easy comfort between them, the genuine connection that transcended biological relationship. Another contrast to my family experience, where non-relatives were kept at careful distance, never fully integrated into intimate family circles. Regardless of relationship longevity, the afternoon progressed with more arrivals, more conversations, more sharing of food and drink and stories. At some point, someone began playing the piano in the corner of the living room, and impromptu carol singing emerged, not the rehearsed performances of my childhood Christmas gatherings, but enthusiastic if occasionally off-key renditions with much laughter at forgotten lyrics and missed high notes. Standing slightly apart, watching this joyful community celebration, I felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude for being included, appreciation for these people who embodied genuine connection, and a touch of sadness for the years spent in environments where appearance consistently trumped authenticity. Yet the sadness wasn't debilitating or bitter. Rather, it carried the sweetness of recognition, of finally understanding what genuine belonging felt like by experiencing its actual presence. "Penny for your thoughts," Diane said, appearing beside me with a glass of wine. "You look contemplative." "Just appreciating all this," I replied, gesturing toward the gathering. "It's special, what you've created here." She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Community is the most worthwhile human project. Not achievement or acquisition or influence, just genuine connection between people who see and value each other as they actually are. "You make it seem so simple," I observed. "My family makes it feel impossibly complex." "Oh, it's not simple at all," she corrected. "Creating space for authentic connection requires constant intention and frequent forgiveness. We fail at it regularly, hold grudges occasionally, miss opportunities for genuine presence, but we keep trying because nothing else matters quite as much in the end." Her words resonated deeply, articulating something I'd felt increasingly over recent weeks: that genuine connection, even with its messiness and vulnerability, was infinitely more valuable than the perfect-appearing but emotionally hollow interactions that had characterized so much of my life. "Rem mentioned your professional background is psychology," I said. "It shows in your wisdom about human relationships." Diane laughed softly. "Less my professional training and more my personal failures, honestly. Nothing teaches relationship. Wisdom quite like nearly destroying your marriage through stubborn pride and poor communication." She patted my arm gently. "But that's a story for another time. For now, just enjoy the celebration. You belong here, Sarah. Not as Rem's colleague or our guest, but as yourself. A person of value entirely independent of role or relationship." With those words, she moved back into the gathering, leaving me with a sense of acceptance more profound than any I'd experienced in recent memory, perhaps ever. Not belonging based on achievement or conformity or family connection, but simply because my authentic presence was deemed inherently valuable. As evening approached, the gathering began to shift. Some guests departed with warm embraces and promises of future connections. Others settled into comfortable conversation groups, the energy transitioning from festive celebration to relaxed companionship. In the kitchen, preparations for evening dinner began. A less formal affair than lunch had been, focused on comfort foods and easily served options. I found myself helping with simple tasks, arranging cookies on platters, refilling water pitchers, straightening abandoned napkins. The activity provided gentle purpose while allowing continued participation in the flowing conversation around me. This natural integration into the household rhythm felt significant, not being treated as guest to be served, but as participant in shared experience. At one point, I excused myself briefly, needing a moment of quiet to process the emotional fullness of the day. The conservatory, now emptied of guests who had congregated in warmer spaces as evening darkness fell, offered perfect sanctuary. I stood watching snow continue to fall outside the windows, the landscape transformed into dreamlike softness under continuous white powder. The door opened quietly behind me, and I turned to find Rem entering with 2 steaming mugs. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us!